Tom Reinhardt had lived on Pine Hollow Lane for 6 peaceful years. He chose that small cul-de-sac for one reason: no HOA, no petty rules, no one fining him over grass length or the color of his garage door. Just peace. So when he found a crisp, white envelope taped to his door with final notice, enforcement imminent in bold red across the top, he thought it was a scam. It WASN, single quotes T. Inside was an invoice for $1,248 in unpaid HOA dues. Enclosed were photos of his mailbox, apparently a violation for not being HOA compliant and a $100 daily fine for refusing to respond to HOA correspondence. He scoffed. There was no HOA on Pine Hollow Lane. The nearest HOA was in Windham Hills, 2 blocks over. And that's when she appeared. Karen Wilcox. Short blonde hair, clipboard in hand, sweater tied around her shoulders, like some suburban general. She didn't knock, she marched right up his driveway like she owned it. "You're delinquent," she said, not bothering to introduce herself. "This is your 3rd warning. If you don't pay, we'll be forced to involve law enforcement." Tom blinked. "You've got the wrong guy. I'm not in your HOA." Karen smiled like a wolf. "That's where you're mistaken." Tom slammed the door. But that letter wouldn't be the last. Stick around, because what Tom uncovered next would send Karen's whole operation crashing down. But not before she made her boldest move yet, trying to get him arrested. Part 2. The forged boundary. The next day, Tom took out every legal document tied to his property. Deed, survey, title, history, everything. None of it mentioned HOA jurisdiction. It was clean. He remembered his realtor clearly. No HOA drama. Still, Karen's threat stuck in his mind. He went to the county office. There, buried under updates he never consented to, was a map revision filed by Windham Hills HOA. It extended the HOA's boundary just enough to include Tom's house. Filed after he moved in. When he asked for a copy, the county clerk looked uneasy. "You're not the first to ask. A few other homeowners on your street came in this month." Back home, Tom knocked on a few doors. 3 of his neighbors had also received HOA notices and all assumed they'd just missed something in their contracts. One had already paid. It was a shakedown. That night, Tom sent a cease and desist letter via email and certified mail. He also posted about it on a local forum. And the next morning, 2 uniformed officers stood at his front door. "Sir, we've received a report of threats made against a Windham Hills board member." Karen stood behind them, arms folded, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. That was the moment Tom realized this wasn't just a mistake, it was a setup. Part 3. Civil charges and known crimes. Tom wasn't arrested, but the officers warned him that any further harassment would result in charges. Then came a civil summons. Windham Hills HOA was suing him. Claims included non-payment of dues, violation of HOA aesthetics codes, and intentional disruption of community peace. One specific violation: his garden gnomes. The claim said they were excessive, garish, and aggressively displayed. Karen had attached photos as evidence. Tom was furious, but he couldn't just yell into the void. He needed help. He contacted Sasha Lee, a lawyer known for fighting HOA overreach. She reviewed everything, especially the HOA's claim that Tom was under their jurisdiction. "They forged this," she said calmly, holding up the plat map. Tom leaned in. "You sure? Positive? There are signatures here from a city planner who retired in 2019. The file is dated 2021. It wasn't just shady, it was criminal, and if Sasha was right, Karen's entire empire was built on fake paperwork. Don't blink now, because Tom was about to go on the offensive, and things were about to explode. Tom couldn't shake Karen's smug words from his head. "That's where you're mistaken." The confidence, the audacity, wasn't just neighborly posturing. It was something more sinister. That night, he stayed up late digging through every document tied to his property. His original deed, closing documents, survey lines, title, insurance, all of them clear. His home sat outside any homeowners association jurisdiction. That had been the main selling point of the home when he bought it 6 years ago. Still, something didn't add up. If Karen believed what she said, either she was crazy, or she had paperwork that said otherwise. The next morning, Tom took a trip down to the county recorder's office. He asked for any updated plats or boundary changes concerning Windham Hills or Pine Hollow Lane. The clerk, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, tapped at his keyboard. After a long pause, he raised an eyebrow. "You live at 49 Pine Hollow?" "Yeah." You're not the first person from that street asking about HOA expansion this month. Tom leaned in. What did you find? The clerk slid a printed map across the counter. It was a recent update dated just last year. The Wyndham Hills HOA boundary had been expanded to include Tom's cul-de-sac. Just 5 homes tacked on with a dotted red line that looped around his street like a noose. Filed under a resolution by the Wyndham Hills HOA board. But that can't be legal, Tom muttered. I never signed anything. I didn't approve any annexation. You're right, the clerk said. And here's the kicker, this map isn't even signed off by city planning. That's a requirement. This document shouldn't even be here. Tom requested a certified copy of the file. As the clerk handed it over, he gave Tom a grim look. If I were you, I'd talk to an attorney. Something about this stinks. Back at home, Tom knocked on his neighbors' doors. He started with Mark and Linda across the street. Mark's face dropped the second he heard HOA. We got the same letter, he said. Didn't make sense, but we didn't want trouble, so we just paid it. Paid it? Tom asked, stunned. How much? $300. Said we were only 2 months behind. I thought maybe it was some old agreement we didn't know about. Linda added, they sent pictures of our mailbox in our shed. Made it seem legit. Tom moved to the next house. Nina, a retired teacher. She hadn't paid. She was furious. They told me I couldn't fly my garden flag because it wasn't HOA approved. What HOA? I called the city. They said there was no record of an expansion. That was the key. Tom's next call was to his cousin Rob, a real estate broker. Ever hear of an HOA expanding their boundaries without the owner's consent? He asked. Rob chuckled dryly. Only in lawsuits. An HOA can't annex private property unless it's in the original CC&Rs and voted on. Otherwise, it's just wishful thinking, or fraud. Exactly what Tom feared. He typed up a formal cease and desist, and sent it certified mail to Wyndham Hills HOA, addressed to their board chair, Karen Wilcox. He also sent copies to the city council, county recorder's office, and local newspaper just in case. And then, for good measure, he posted his story on the Nextdoor app, a long, detailed post with documents attached. Being threatened by an HOA, I never joined. Has this happened to anyone else? Within an hour, he had 16 replies. 2 of them were from homeowners in Wyndham Hills proper, who claimed Karen had a habit of overstepping and making threats. Another mentioned her forcing fines on an elderly veteran for putting up Christmas lights too early. The fire was lit, but the next morning, Tom's doorbell rang again. Only this time, it wasn't Karen. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies stood on his porch. Mr. Reinhardt, one began. We received a report of harassment and verbal threats made against a local HOA board member. You need to come with us for questioning. And behind them, arms folded, standing next to her SUV, Karen grinning. The trap had been set, but Karen had made one critical mistake. She assumed Tom would go down quietly. The sheriff's deputy wasn't hostile, just following protocol. Tom explained everything calmly, laid out the situation, even offered to show them the forged map and his deed. After an hour at the station and a few raised eyebrows from the desk sergeant, Tom was released without charges, but the damage had already started. Back home, Tom found another envelope wedged into his screen door. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was a civil court summons. Plaintiff, Wyndham Hills Homeowners Association, defendant Thomas Reinhardt, allegations, non-payment of HOA dues, violation of community codes, and willful disruption of HOA business affairs. His stomach turned as he flipped through the pages. One line stood out like a neon sign. Defendant's continued display of hostile garden decor, including 18 unauthorized garden gnomes and wind chimes, has violated Wyndham Hills HOA's aesthetic uniformity clause. Tom nearly laughed. But it wasn't funny. They were suing him for $4,120 in dues and fines. And according to the enclosed violation log, they had been documenting infractions for over 8 months, none of which he'd ever seen or agreed to. He marched over to his shed, opened it, and pulled down the folder labeled Purchase and Property Docs. He wasn't crazy. His land was private, and not subject to any community code. He needed help. Enter Sasha Leah, civil attorney with a reputation for dismantling corrupt HOA boards. Tom emailed her everything. Within a day, she replied with one line, Tom, you're sitting on a case of forged jurisdiction. Let's bury them. Tom met Sasha the following morning in her modest downtown office. She wore sharp glasses, spoke quickly, and had already flagged 24 legal discrepancies in the HOA's court filing. She pointed to the forged map. This map was filed last year. But this signature here. She pointed to the name John W. Lambert, listed as a city planner. Lambert retired 3 years ago. The city seal is outdated too. That stamp hasn't been used since 2018. Tom leaned forward. So, this is fake. Worse than fake, Sasha said. This is felony-level fraud if we can prove they filed this knowing it was false. And if they tried to extort dues, off it, Sasha smirked. Then we're talking attempted theft by deception. Tom sat back in his chair. Karen really messed with the wrong guy. But Sasha wasn't done. She explained they needed to prove intent that Karen knew the documents were false and filed them anyway. We'll need her to admit it. Or catch her trying to enforce something she has no legal basis for. That's when Tom had an idea. I'll go to their board meeting, he said. Pretend I want to resolve it quietly. See what she says when she thinks I'm ready to cave. Sasha paused. You willing to record it? Absolutely. They met again the next day to draft a legal strategy. Sasha would file a countersuit for harassment, attempted fraud, and unlawful lien threats. Meanwhile, Tom would attend the next Wyndham Hills HOA board meeting with a discreet voice recorder in his pocket. Before he left the office, Sasha said, be careful. If Karen's bold enough to call the cops on you with nothing but hot air, she may not be working alone. That night, Tom stared at his front yard. His gnomes were still lined up perfectly along the walkways, smiling, unapologetic. He wasn't going to be bullied by fake fines and backyard dictators. But little did he know Karen had been operating like this for years. And what he'd uncover at that HOA meeting would not only shake the neighborhood, but lead to criminal charges, resignations, and a courtroom twist no one expected. Tom arrived at the Wyndham Hills Community Center just before 7 p.m. The board meeting was already underway. Folding chairs lined the back wall, and a long foam mahogany table sat at the front with 6 board members, seated Karen dead center. Leading the charge with that same artificial smile she wore like armor. He kept his head down, his demeanor neutral. Hidden in the breast pocket of his jacket was a pen recorder barely visible, but active. Next item on the agenda, Karen said brightly, the Reinhardt situation. One of the board members, an older man in a golf cap, leaned forward, thought he wasn't part of the HOA. Karen laughed, a thin, sharp sound that echoed off the walls. He is now. Our revised boundary map includes his property. He just doesn't know what's good for him. Another woman frowned. Isn't there a problem with that filing? Karen didn't flinch. Let me be clear, most homeowners don't read plat maps or question jurisdiction. If they get a letter, they pay. We're not doing anything wrong. We're enforcing order. Tom's jaw tensed. He stayed still, forcing himself to breathe. Then she said something he didn't expect. If we start questioning every annexation, we lose authority. We need to keep the pressure on, especially with him. That yard? That mailbox? Those ridiculous gnomes, he's practically begging to be fined. Laughter rippled through the room. One board member muttered, he's filing countersuit, right? Karen rolled her eyes. Let him. The guy doesn't know the law. We've handled worse. Once the lien hits his property, he'll fold. That was it, intent, arrogance, recorded on tape. Tom slipped out quietly before the meeting ended. He didn't wait until morning. He called Sasha right from the car. I got everything, he said. She admitted it. The boundary was changed without legal process. She knew it. The board questioned it and she said it didn't matter. Sasha's voice was calm, focused. Perfect, we're moving now. Within 48 hours, she had submitted a motion to the court, along with Tom's audio recording. But she didn't stop there. She forwarded it to the county district attorney's office, citing fraudulent filings, unlawful collection attempts, and abusive legal process. Then came the press. Sasha knew a few people at the local paper who loved a story with teeth. And when the headline ran, HOA accused of forging boundaries, extorting dues from non-members, the neighborhood started buzzing. By that weekend, Tom couldn't walk to his mailbox without a neighbor pulling him aside. I thought it was just me, one woman whispered. They made me pay for repainting my shutters, said it was required under some new visual compliance rule. Another man, who'd lived in the area for 2 decades, confessed he'd always suspected Karen was up to something. She just showed up one day, said she was the president. No vote, no warning. Karen's grip on the neighborhood was slipping, but she wasn't going quietly the next day. A new letter appeared taped to Tom's garage. Final warning. Legal action pending. This time, it wasn't typed. It was handwritten, and underneath it, in thick black Sharpie, "We don't like rats in this neighborhood." Tom stared at it for a long time before peeling it off and walking inside. He'd rattled the cage in. Karen was getting desperate, but she had no idea what was coming next, because Tom and Sasha had one final move in play: a formal complaint to the state attorney general's office. Once that went through, Karen wouldn't just be facing angry neighbors or civil court. She'd be facing criminal charges. Tom sat at Sasha's office conference table, hands clasped, eyes steady. The recording had lit a fire under the investigation, and now the DA's office was watching closely. "This is where we hit hard," Sasha said, "but to make this stick, we need to go further than just exposing the fraud. We need someone on the inside, someone who can confirm Karen's been doing this for years." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You think she's got someone willing to flip?" "I don't think," Sasha replied. "I know. People like Karen don't run scams like this alone. She's bold, sure, but not invincible." They crafted a plan. While Sasha filed a criminal referral with the state, Tom reached out carefully to other Wyndham Hills board members. He started with the one who had looked uneasy during the meeting, Marlene Grayson. Tom invited her for coffee under the guise of clearing the air. At first, Marlene was stiff, defensive, but the moment Tom brought up the forged annexation documents, something changed. Her posture softened, her voice dropped. "I told Karen it wasn't legal," she whispered. "She said not to worry, that no one would challenge it." "She knew?" Tom asked. "She orchestrated it," Marlene replied. "She created the map, pushed it through, and bullied the board into silence. Said it was modernizing governance. But I knew she was overstepping." Tom didn't push further. He simply asked, "Would you be willing to speak to my lawyer?" She hesitated, then nodded. That night, Tom called Sasha. "We've got her." The next week, Marlene submitted a signed affidavit outlining Karen's fraudulent behavior, manipulation of documents, and open discussion of targeting non-HOA homeowners for financial gain. She admitted that several board members had expressed doubt, but Karen silenced them with threats of removal or lawsuits. The DA moved quickly. A subpoena was issued for all Wyndham Hills HOA records. A search warrant followed for Karen's home, office. Local news picked up the story again. This time, it hit harder. HOA president under investigation for fraud, coercion, and unlawful collection practices. Karen didn't make a public statement, but neighbors noticed her porch lights stayed off at night. She stopped walking her dog, and her once daily patrols around the neighborhood. Gone. But the quiet didn't last. 2 days later, Karen held an emergency board meeting. No guests allowed, no cameras, no press. Tom, of course, wasn't invited, but Marlene filled him in. "She's scared," Marlene said. "She told us to destroy old violation records and delete anything that referenced non-HOA properties. But I didn't. I saved everything." That was the smoking gun. Marlene provided Sasha with archived emails, screenshots of conversations between board members, many showing Karen bragging about how much money they had collected from unaware property owners. One email, dated 6 months prior, even joked about raising fines for flag violations during election season, since they'll all be too distracted to fight it. Sasha forwarded the file to the district attorney. Then came the call. "Tom," Sasha said, her voice electric, "they're going to arrest her, within 72 hours. Tom didn't know what to say. All he could do was stare out his window past the row of garden gnomes, past the edge of the sidewalk where Karen had once stood threatening him, and wait. But before the DA could act, Karen made one last desperate move. A final letter arrived in Tom's mailbox. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper scrawled in ink. "You think you've won, but this street's still mine. You'll pay one way or another." Tom looked up and saw Karen's SUV parked at the end of the street, engine idling. She was watching, but this time, he didn't flinch, because the next time Karen saw Tom, it would be across a courtroom. It was raining the morning. Karen Wilcox was arrested, not the dramatic thunderstorm kindest, a cold gray drizzle that soaked the cold and made everything feel like a funeral. Fitting, Tom thought, as he sipped his coffee and looked out the window. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up slow, lights spinning silently. 2 plainclothes detectives stepped out, followed by a uniformed officer. They approached Karen's house, like they'd done it before, and then there she was. Karen stood at the threshold of her red brick porch, Arms crossed, lips tight. No clipboard this time. Just defiance. Tom leaned forward against the WINDOWSILL. They read her the charges: fraudulent filing of government documents, attempted extortion, harassment, and abuse of legal process. Karen didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised. She just muttered, "You people are making a mistake." But everyone knew the truth now. Within hours, the arrest made headlines. Local news vans swarmed Windham Hills like vultures. Tom's inbox flooded with messages, neighbors, local activists, and even reporters asking for quotes. Karen was charged with 6 felony counts. The DA's office credited the charges to a courageous whistleblower, referring to Marlene's affidavit, and a private citizen who gathered irrefutable evidence of intentional misconduct. That was Tom. Sasha moved quickly, filing a civil countersuit on Tom's behalf. Claims included defamation, attempted property lien under false pretenses, emotional distress, abuse of legal process, and damages for time, legal fees, and public humiliation. The amount, $250,000. And the Windham Hills HOA itself, facing its own reckoning. With Karen gone, the board was in chaos. 3 members resigned. Marlene stepped in as interim president, and her first move was to suspend all collection activity and call for a forensic audit of every dollar collected in the past 2 years. That audit revealed more than just bad paperwork. Over $38,000 had been collected in known HOA compliance fines from households not legally within Windham Hills jurisdiction. Most of it was unaccounted for, paid via cash, check, or mobile transfer into a secondary account only Karen controlled. People were livid. Elderly homeowners, single parents, and even veterans came forward with stories of coercion, threats, and shame. Some had been too embarrassed to speak up until now. And through it all, Tom stayed calm. He declined media interviews, ignored the noise, and focused on finishing what he started. His goal wasn't fame. It was accountability. But Karen wasn't done. During the preliminary hearing, she shocked everyone by pleading not guilty. Her lawyer argued she had operated under the belief that she had lawful authority and claimed the forged documents were misunderstandings filed by a clerical assistant. But the court wasn't buying it. The judge allowed the trial to proceed and warned her attorney that any proven tampering with public records would result in additional charges. That same week, Sasha received a curious letter. It was from Karen's husband, Charles Wilcox, a quiet retired contractor who'd never been seen at meetings, never spoken publicly. Inside the envelope was a flash drive and a note. "I don't condone what she did. You should have everything you need here." Tom watched as Sasha plugged it in. On the drive, a folder titled HOA Schemes. Dozens of file-scanned letters, draft notices, billing templates, even notes on how to pressure reluctant residents. There were voice memos, to Karen, coaching board members on creating urgency, suggesting they lean on legal-sounding words to shut down pushback. It was everything. Enough to make the DA consider expanding the case, enough to trigger additional subpoenas, and enough to prove that Karen had built an empire out of lies and trained others to do the same. But Tom still had one question. Why? What drove Karen to do all this? Was it power, ego, greed? He didn't know yet, but in the next part of the story, he'd find out, and the answer would be far worse than he imagined. The folder from Charles Wilcox had turned the case into a wildfire. With every file Sasha reviewed, the story got darker. This wasn't just about control. Karen hadn't improvised her way into HOA fraud. She had orchestrated every piece. The templates were refined. The forged documents were duplicated across multiple cases. The language was polished to intimidate. It wasn't her first time, but something still bothered Tom. Why? Why go to such extreme lengths over a suburban neighborhood? Why manipulate dozens of people, fake boundaries, risk prison time, just for HOA dues and aesthetic violations? Sasha dug deeper. She assigned a private investigator to look into Karen's history, searching for anything that might explain her obsession with enforcement. And then they found it. 15 years ago, Karen Wilcox had lived in another town, Lake Bend Shores, about 90 miles away. She was president of the HOA there too. But something had gone horribly wrong. Tom stared at the article Sasha slid across the table. Lake Bend family evicted after dispute with HOA president. The story was short, buried deep in old archives. A family of 4 two-parents. 2 kids had fought their HOA over fines for a backyard playhouse that didn't meet height restrictions. Karen, as HOA president, had escalated it. The board placed a lien on their property. It was legal, but aggressive. The family couldn't keep up with mounting fees. Eventually, they lost their home. 2 months later, the father, a veteran, took his own life. The board was investigated but no one was charged. Karen resigned quietly. Tom's blood ran cold. "She's been doing this for years," he muttered. "Worse," Sasha said. "She got away with it and decided she liked the power." That old case had been buried under a different name, Karen Whitfield. She'd changed her surname after marrying Charles, moved to Wyndham Hills, and started again. But this time, she wasn't going to wait for residents to challenge her. She came in swinging. Everything made sense now. Her obsession with control. Her lack of empathy. The way she spoke about neighbors like they were chess pieces. She wasn't just defending HOA authority. She was using it as a weapon to punish anyone who challenged her authority. The trial date was approaching fast. But public interest was already boiling over. Local news dubbed her the HOA Queen, and memes of her final warning letters were circulating on social media. Residents who had once feared Karen were now marching to dissolve the HOA entirely. One night, as Tom was locking up, a knock came at his door. It was Charles. He looked 10 years older than the last time Tom had seen him, pale, exhausted. "I'm sorry," he said, voice trembling. "I should have stopped her." Tom hesitated. "Why didn't you?" Charles rubbed his eyes. She wasn't always like this, but after Lake Bend, she snapped. Said no one would ever humiliate her again. She made the HOA her identity. It was all she had left. They stood in silence. "I gave you the flash drive because I couldn't keep covering for her," Charles added. "She crossed a line, and if you hadn't stopped her, no one would have." Tom nodded, unsure whether to feel pity or anger. Past was finally catching up to Harand. Justice was closing in. But Sasha warned him to stay vigilant. She's cornered now. And cornered people do unpredictable things. Sure enough, the next morning, a new anonymous post appeared online, claiming Tom had fabricated evidence, bribed board members, and was trying to take over the HOA himself. The username was fake, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. Tom didn't respond. He didn't need to because in 1 week they'd be in court. And the truth, it was loaded, locked, and ready to fire. The courtroom was packed. Tom sat beside Sasha at the plaintiff's table, dressed in a gray suit that felt heavier than it looked. Behind him were neighbors, some from Pine Hollow, some from Wyndham Hills, many who had come not just to support, but to witness the fall of a tyrant. Karen sat at the defense table, still composed, still cold. Her lawyer whispered occasionally, but she barely reacted. No emotion. No guilt. Just the same rigid posture and eyes locked straight ahead. The trial lasted for days. Sasha was surgical. She walked the jury through forged documents, played clips from Tom's secret recording, and introduced the files from the flash drive Charles had handed over. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than outrage ever could. Marlene testified, to her voice cracking as she described being manipulated into silence. "We all knew it felt wrong," she said, but Karen made it clear either you played along or you got steamrolled. Karen's defense was brittle. Her lawyer claimed she acted under the assumption that annexation was permitted, that the forms were submitted in good faith, that no one forced homeowners to path, they voluntarily complied. Sasha countered, with a slideshow of threats, final warning letters, false liens. Even screenshots of Karen's email titled "Pressure Points for Known HOA Homes." When the judge dismissed the defense's motion for summary judgment, the room shifted. Everyone could feel it. The fall was coming. On the fourth day, closing arguments ended. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours. They returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty in all 6 civil claims. Libel for fraud, defamation, emotional distress, and unlawful attempts to lien a non-HOA property. Karen was ordered to pay $180,000 in damages to Tom, and an additional $75,000 in restitution to be divided among 12 affected homeowners, and that wasn't the end of it. The judge recommended criminal prosecution proceed immediately. The DA confirmed they were moving forward. Karen was handcuffed and escorted from the courtroom. Still silent, still stone. Tom exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. But just when he thought it was over, the twist hit, not in court, but in the parking lot. Sasha's phone buzzed. She answered, nodded, then looked at Tom with an expression he hadn't seen before. Disbelief. "That was the investigator," she said. Karen had a second account. offshore, Cayman Islands, and we just found the wire logs. Tom's eyes widened. Wait, what? She wasn't doing this for power, Sasha said slowly. She was doing it for profit. This was organized theft. There's over $400,000 missing from HOA accounts over the past 3 years. She funneled it through shell corporations. Karen hadn't just bullied homeowners with phony fines, she had turned her HOA into a personal money machine. And she almost got away with it. Within a week, federal authorities became involved. The IRS launched its own investigation. Multiple past board members were subpoenaed. The Wyndham Hills HOA officially dissolved. All homeowners were released from dues, obligations, and a class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of everyone Karen had targeted. But Tom, he had one final move. With the damages he won, he bought the vacant commercial lot next to the community center Karen once ruled over. 6 months later, a small brick office opened with a green wooden sign, the Reinhardt Center, Legal Aid, for HOA abuse victims, free consultations, workshops, education. Tom had turned his nightmare into purpose. At the grand opening, neighbors gathered, some hugged him, some shook his hand. One whispered, "You gave us our street back." Tom smiled. No one should ever be afraid of their own neighborhood, and as he looked across the lawn, past the trimmed hedges and quiet homes, he saw something that made him laugh. A single garden gnome, left anonymously near the welcome sign, wearing tiny sunglasses and holding a scale of justice. He picked it up, placed it next to the door, and walked inside. Karen had tried to own the street, but in the end, the street owned her.